Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to E-Bible Fellowship's video conference open forum, I guess we can call it. Everyone is, actually, you know what? I'll be right back. Okay. Glad I remember to take off this microphone. I've walked away with it a few times. Okay, at this time, we're going to open up the Zoom room for questions, comments. And in case you're new, at the bottom of your screen, down below where it says reactions, if you click reactions, you'll see a hand. And if you click that, that'll raise your hand and let us know that you have a question or, you have something you'd like to say. And then you can take the microphone. Now there's a process with taking the microphone. When and we'll go in order. So when it's your turn, we have to send you an invitation, and you have to accept the invitation. Then you can take the microphone. So if we say, "All right, John, go ahead," but you haven't accepted the invitation, you'll not be able to be heard. You have to first accept that invitation. Okay, why don't we just begin at this time, and we will go to John first, John Marino. John, we'll send you the link, and you can accept it and then take the mic.
Hello?
Hi.
Hi.
Please go ahead with your question.
Yeah, I have like two more questions I wanted to ask you what I was talking to this afternoon. I was wondering where and when were the angels created, and did God give them names when they were created? Do they have names?
As far as exactly when, I don't know if we can get any more precise than we see that Satan is in the Garden of Eden, and we know he's a fallen angel. So previously to that point, and that was very early on in the creation, that God, he set apart the Garden of Eden from the rest of the creation. Really, the Garden of Eden became like the outward representation of God's kingdom on the earth. There was no need for it. The whole earth was perfect, but God, he made that set apart and separate from the rest of the creation. And also, God gave the law concerning the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And we don't know exactly how long Adam and Eve lived obediently by not eating of that tree. Could have been several weeks, maybe it was a few months. We really don't know exactly, but we do know there is Satan, already a created angelic being who has plotted already at that point to come to man and to lie in order to get man, the creature made in the image of God, in order to get him to obey the lie rather than the truth. And the other thing we know, I guess we could see in Colossians chapter 1, concerning Christ as the creator, we read in Colossians chapter 1 in verse 16, for by him were all things created that are in heaven and that are in earth, visible and invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers, all things were created by him and for him. And the angels, angelic beings, are spirit beings, so they're invisible. So we know Christ created them as well as all the physical things, the visible things of this creation. And exactly when, I don't know of a verse that pinpoints exactly when these spiritual beings called angels were created. It could have been right at the same time. I don't know. I just can't. It would just be speculation unless we have a verse to show it and prove it. And I'm not sure where that verse is.
Genesis 2 verse 1 might say it.
Genesis 2:1. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And
the host of them, wouldn't that be angels, the good angels?
well, not necessarily. Again, the reference to heavens, it's not, nothing in the Bible is easy, but God speaks of three heavens. Paul, the Apostle Paul, was caught up to the third heaven, and we know there's the first heaven of the sky, the blue sky, second heaven of space, third heaven of the spiritual invisible kingdom. And so thus the heavens and the earth were finished. The problem with thinking, well, that has to do with the spiritual heavens, is that God has been king. He's the everlasting king who's been dwelling in that eternal kingdom of heaven for as long as he's been God. So that presents a problem. If you're trying to say that this is the point of the creation of the spiritual realm of existence, if that's what you mean by heavens, then it just, I don't see how it can be. Where was God dwelling prior to this? Where when we look at that heaven where God dwells, as far as what I can see, the Bible teaches it is it has existed as long as God, and so I would really hesitate before I said, well, here's where God created the spiritual realm of things. I don't know if he tells us that information.
One thing just about when and then I'll let you go. Chapter 2, verse 20, Genesis.
Chapter 2, verse 20, and Adam gave names to all cattle, and to the fowl of the air, and to every beast of the field. But for Adam there was not found a helpmeet for him.
Now, if Satan was there disguised as an animal, he gave him the name the serpent. If he was naming all the animals, I just thought
no, that's not how it was. That's not how it was. The one of the creatures was called a serpent, and he was wiser. That's what it says, or more subtle in verse 1 of chapter 3. Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which Jehovah God had made. In other words, Satan was not always indwelling the serpent. We know from the New Testament that Judas was not always indwelt by Satan. but there came a specific point in time, and then Satan entered into him in order to accomplish his purpose of using Judas to betray the Lord, and then Satan came out of him. It would have been the same thing with the serpent. Satan entered into him, using him to present the temptation, to deliver the lie and to test Adam and Eve concerning the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But then after this, he would have come out. He didn't continue to indwell the serpent. There would have been no reason for it. But thank you.
Thank you very much.
For sharing your questions. And now we'll go to Bob. Bob, we're going to send you a link. You have to accept, and then you can take the mic.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, very good.
Okay. My question's in Jeremiah 12, verses 14 to 17.
Jeremiah 12. Starting in verse 14, it says there, "Thus saith Jehovah against all mine evil neighbors that touch the inheritance which I have caused my people Israel to inherit. Behold, I will pluck them out of their land and pluck out." I'm going to start over from the top of verse 14. "Thus saith Jehovah against all mine evil neighbors that touch the inheritance which I have caused my people Israel to inherit. Behold, I will pluck them out of their land and pluck out the house of Judah from among them. And shall come to pass, after that I have plucked them out, I will return and have compassion on them, and will bring them again, every man to his heritage and every man to his land. And it shall come to pass, if they will diligently learn the ways of my people, to swear by my name, Jehovah liveth, as they taught my people to swear by Baal, then shall they be built in the midst of my people. But if they will not obey, I will utterly pluck up and destroy that nation, saith Jehovah."
Yeah, can you explain that?
Well, it's a little difficult. That's why, especially verse 14, I wanted to read that a couple of times. But okay, let's try to go slow. Jehovah is speaking against his evil neighbors that touch the inheritance which he caused his people Israel to inherit. So historically, the land of Canaan was that inheritance, and they had neighbors, the surrounding nations that we do know were evil, and they often oppressed the people of Israel. So far, we can understand that. Behold, I will pluck them out of their land, excuse me, and pluck out the house of Judah from among them. This seems to be referring to the inhabitants of the land of Canaan, and God disinherited them, and in that way plucked them out of the land and gave it to Israel or Judah. But he also says he will pluck out the house of Judah from among them. So that makes it much more difficult to understand. And it shall come to pass that after that I have plucked them out, I will return and have compassion on them and will bring them again. What I think is in view with these evil neighbors would be the nations of the world. The nations of the world are the Gentiles, and it was the Gentiles that formed the churches. The nation of Israel was God's representation on the earth, but then it transferred to the churches. So the evil neighbors, the nations, themselves became God's representatives, and of them he plucked out the house of Judah from among them, from among the nations, to form the corporate church. And it shall come to pass after that I have plucked them out, I will return and have compassion on them. So it could be that God is speaking of forming the New Testament church, and after forming it, the gospel would be there, wherein the Gentiles could potentially become saved within the churches and congregations. And that's why it's language of salvation. It will return, have compassion, it will bring them again, every man to his heritage and every man to his land. Now,
Yeah, that's where I was thinking that if in verse 15, if he's plucking them out and then returning, I was just thinking that it could be,
the end of the church age. Is that
could
what
be
you were
May
thinking?
21, 2011 was when I will return. I was just wondering if that's what it could be.
Well,
Because he plucked out everybody from the churches. Doesn't mention the latter rain or anything, but I don't know. I just I came across this today. I was wondering, it was confusing. And then also, verses particularly in 16 and 17 are tough too.
yeah, it's very difficult. I have a suggestion. Look up Mr. Camping's Jeremiah study, and because I'm going to try and do that.
Yeah. I think I have
It's
some
sort
notes
of
here
kind
in
of
the Bible.
like Twister. You get all twisted into knots
Yeah, there's so many
with these statements. As soon as you think you're following something, then it kind of takes a turn, and you're wondering, well, was I following it correctly? So it's something that I was saying I think about, and that's speculation. So it's probably better to put it aside and check it out. I would be very interested to see how Mr. Camping handled this. The only problem is when you find the Jeremiah study, there's like almost 700 studies, and they're not listed by chapter. So you have to kind of okay, let's see, this is chapter 12. That would be early on, maybe like study 175 and see where it lands, and then at least that's what I do. I don't know if someone else has a better way of finding out where a particular chapter verse is, but I normally try to estimate, okay, that's the first part of the Jeremiah study pretty much, so about 175, and then hopefully it gets me near in the ballpark, and then try to work towards it. But it's very good that we have access to those studies on the internet or on YouTube, and we can review, because much of the work has been done for us in that area. Now, there might be some additional correction because of our vantage point of living in Judgment Day, but I would refer you and myself to Mr. Camping's Jeremiah study right now.
Yeah, the notes that I have, I think, were from Mr. Camping, and he had in verse 14, the first them, behold, I will pluck them out of the land. He's saying for judgment. So, and then pluck out the house of Judah from among them, and he referred to them as believers. And then in verse 15, it shall come to pass after that I have plucked them, the house of Judah, out, I will return.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It depends on the Hebrew word translated pluck out. because if the first one's used negatively in judgment, we would have to see how it's used elsewhere. And if everywhere we look, it's always judgment, then we have to come back here and say, well, I checked out this word pluck out, and it's always judgment. So how could it be deliverance or salvation? With the second group, that would be something to confirm. Now, one of the problems with Mr. Camping notes is that there's many different, because he taught so long. Is that a note taken prior in the 1980s, or is it in the 1990s, or is it
it was
after
in
2001?
In the 90s.
It was in the 90s. So he didn't have a good grasp on the end of the church age at that time.
Oh, no. When was the last time you went through Jeremiah?
I think that was in the 2000s.
No, so it would have been in the 2000s.
Yeah, that's when he came to understand the end of the church age, through the study of it was through the study of Acts and Jeremiah.
Right.
I think Acts led him to the book of Jeremiah.
Do you want to comment on 16 and 17?
No sense.
Okay.
No sense. It would, you have to understand what comes before it, I think. But
Okay,
thank you. Thank you for sharing. And let's go to Shirley. Shirley, we'll send you invitation and you can take the mic.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, very well. Very well.
Okay,
Coming
perfect.
through loud and clear.
Okay, Leviticus chapter 24, verses 20 to 23.
Leviticus 24, 20 through 23.
Correct, yes.
Breach for breach, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. As he has caused the blemish in a man, so shall it be done to him again. And he that killeth a beast, he shall restore it. And he that killeth a man, he shall be put to death. He shall have one manner of law, as well for the stranger as for one of your own country, for I am Jehovah your God. And Moses spake to the children of Israel that they should bring forth him that had cursed out of the camp and stone him with stones. And the children of Israel did as Jehovah commanded Moses.
Okay, so those verses, like when you put them together, as far as the eye for an eye and stoning due to some sort of sin, right? That would then, the stoning part would then be killing, right? So don't they kind of negate each other? Like the law is to kill if someone sins, but now you're committing that sin. So isn't it the same as, like, I feel like it's a proof of when Jesus drew the line and said, throw the first stone. Like, is that correct? Like, I feel like it almost not contradicts, but it just kind of like God is saying kill, and then he's saying don't kill. Do you know what I mean? Like
the stoning here, I think, goes back to verse 16. He that blasphemeth the name of Jehovah, he shall surely be put to death.
Right.
And all the congregation shall certainly stone him. And then it goes on. So
right.
This was the law of God that was on the books, and we do have recorded incidents in the Bible where men were stoned to death. Achan was stoned to death, and the man who picked up a few sticks on the Sabbath day, he was stoned to death. And it was even, they kept him in ward, and they went to God directly. Moses went to God and said, what should we do with this man? Right. And God said, stone him to death.
Right.
So the death penalty was used in the Old Testament, in various situations, and it was justifiable. It was lawful because it was according to the law of God, and God was simply teaching one thing over and over and over again with all these laws, which is the wages of sin is death. Whether it be a little sin, like picking up a few sticks to start a fire on the Sabbath day, but God said you'll do no work of any kind, or whether it's what we would consider to be a more grievous sin of blaspheming the name of God, or something else, like Achan, who troubled Israel. He stole. He went against God's command not to take anything from Jericho, and so we're kind of shocked due to the day we live in, and in our time, hardly anyone gets the death penalty for anything. They can do the most violent, terrible acts, and they do not end up getting the death penalty. But as far as God's law is concerned, God, in the Garden of Eden, he laid out the death penalty. In the day you eat thereof, you will surely die. Just for eating the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, because the law of God made it off limits. And you see, men come and they don't understand God's holiness and his perfect righteous standard of his law, and they try to paint God as some cruel, harsh, very wrathful God, that he has this kind of strictness according to his law. But we just do not realize, we don't realize how terrible, how awful, how grievous any sin is, any transgression of the law. And so God, in giving these laws and carrying them out in the Old Testament, was emphasizing his holiness and the holiness of his word, and also just making it known that the wages of sin is death, and it doesn't matter what sin you commit. According to the Epistle of James, if you offend in one point, you're guilty of all, and worthy to die. So that's how we have to look at this, from the viewpoint of God. Every human being who has transgressed his law is worthy to die. And so God can take their life at any time. He's already slain all the sinners in their soul. They're dead in trespasses and sins. It's just physical life. And he can come at any time, and he can say, well, you've broken my law, and at this time in history, I am making it known that violating my law brings death. So yes, take the man who picked up a few sticks, stone him to death, and it's lawful and just because he did break the law, and any breaking of the law brings a death penalty. Really, I mean, if you look at it, why are people going to die when they're 70 or 80? It all stems from breaking the law of God. That's why every human being dies, and God's final judgment is on many who never became saved, and then they'll die the second death and be no more because of their sin. And so if God can do that at the end of an individual's life, he can do it at any time during their life, and it's equally just, it's equally righteous And that's why the Lord stresses that it's his righteous judgment program. We may not, and many people do not perceive it as righteous or just, but according to God's law, and that's the real standard to look at, it is righteous and just. Now, in the New Testament, when a woman was caught in adultery and they brought her to Jesus, and they said, if we go to John 8, and they brought up the law. They brought up the law. In John chapter 8, they caught the woman taken in the act of adultery. And then in verse 5, they said to Jesus, now Moses and the law commanded us that such should be stoned. But what sayest thou? This they said, tempting him that they might have to accuse him. But Jesus stooped down and with his finger wrote on the ground as though he heard them not. So when they continued asking him, he lifted up himself and said unto them, he that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her. And again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. And they which heard it, being convicted by their own conscience, went out one by one, beginning at the eldest, even unto the last. And Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. When Jesus had lifted up himself and saw none but the woman, he said unto her, woman, where are those thine accusers? Hath no man condemned thee? She said, no man, Lord. And Jesus said unto her, neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more. So in this case, Christ is emphasizing the forgiveness of God, the grace of God. It's really, this is a historical parable where reference is made to the law of Moses. And mankind, the unsaved people of the world, are married to the law, according to Romans 7, the first few verses. We're married prior to salvation to the law of God, and the law of God condemns us for any act of sin because it's as spiritual adultery, and the law of the Bible says that the person who commits adultery is to be stoned to death. So God, the law of God, condemns and kills the sinner in the day of judgment, really fulfilling that law concerning stoning the adulteress to death. But Christ came and saved certain ones, his elect, and he brought us out from under the law, out of that marriage relationship, so that we would be married to another, to Jesus himself, and we're no longer under the law. That's what the Bible tells us. We're not under the law. We're not subject to our first husband, the law of God. If we sin after salvation, then we might, I hope we do. We have a conscience about it. We feel bad. We feel guilty, and we've been conditioned this way throughout our life until the point of being saved, where that was the purpose of the Bible, to teach us the law, that all the world become guilty before God. But after salvation, when we do wrong and sin, transgress the law of God, there's no more condemnation. That's what happens when we go to the Bible. The Bible tells us if you're truly saved, you're no longer married to the law, you're no longer under the law, and because of that, the law cannot condemn you any longer. And that's what Jesus said to the woman, has no man condemned thee? No, Lord, no man's condemned me. Neither do I condemn thee. And that fits in with the statement in Romans 8, there is therefore now no more condemnation to those that are in Christ Jesus. And and so that's the emphasis that the Lord is making in the New Testament for those that become saved. However, and there would also be a matter of it's a different era. It's a different age, the New Testament gospel age, and the laws that were on the book, many laws concerning the death penalty, we would say were not to be applied in the New Testament era, except for the law of if you kill someone, you are to die. That would still remain. But if someone blasphemes God, as we saw in that chapter, if someone does one of many things that the Bible says should have been the death penalty, well, it doesn't have that kind of application in the New Testament era, except spiritually, it's still, that application of death still remains for the one who has sinned against God, committed spiritual adultery. What's the penalty? Death, to die eternally. Blaspheme God, what's the penalty? Death. If the sin is not paid for by Christ, if your sin is upon you, no matter what it is, that's the penalty. It's always death, death, death. And the stoning to death would point to the experiencing the wrath of God until finally being destroyed. But thank you.
Okay, I have another, I'm sorry, actually, he has a question.
Sure.
Hey, how you doing, Chris? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. You might want to lean in just a little bit. You're
Okay, I'm
a little
all
distant.
right. Okay, how about now? Better?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
good. That's
Okay,
good.
so now this question, just came to me today. Somebody else had mentioned it since there was actually Mr. John Moreno had mentioned it over Genesis chapter 3, verse 14, actually.
Genesis 3:14. Okay, that says, and Jehovah God said unto the serpent, because thou hast done this, thou art cursed above all cattle and above every beast of the field. Upon thy belly shalt thou go, and dust shalt thou eat all the days of thy life.
So basically the question is, what would be God's purpose in punishing the serpent, or if we can even call that punishment so much as, or not so much as punishment, but prophecy? What was the purpose? I mean, I know that Satan indwelt in the serpent, but still, I'm just, I just
I understand what you're asking. It's a little odd because a serpent, a snake, is a creature, and the creatures other than man are not held. They're not responsible. They cannot sin. They're not under the law. So it wouldn't be for that reason. This, I think, would first of all have a spiritual meaning, that really God is just using the serpent to represent Satan, the fallen angel, and so the things said here would have spiritual implications for Satan. But I think it also reveals the serpent originally was a much different kind of creature than we know it today, because it seems that God made a change in it. Because thou hast done this, thou art cursed above all cattle and above every beast of the field. Upon thy belly shalt thou go, and dust shalt thou eat all the days of thy life. And that's what we're accustomed to, what we're familiar with when we think of snakes. They're crawling on their belly and they're in the dust. So the curse, thou art cursed is upon the whole creation, including the creatures. And so the fact that God is cursing the serpent really is true of any creature we might mention, except this does say above all cattle and above every beast of the field. I'm not sure why that would be for the actual creature. But it does appear that the serpent originally, when it appeared to Eve and Adam, that there was it was a different type of creature. It was wise or more subtle than any beast of the field. And given that we're told it's going to go upon its belly, apparently it did not go upon its belly prior to the pronouncement of this curse. How did it go? I have no idea. Or what did it look like? I don't know. I would think it was probably more appealing than after the curse. Well, some people might disagree with me. I'm not one of those people that thinks snakes are kind of cute and cuddly. I don't think that at all. You know, we have. It seems like just about every couple of years I find a snake in the basement, and over the years I've had to deal with 4 or 5 of them, and it's never a pleasant thing for me or for my wife. she basically gets me and runs out of the room. But
I only had one brush. I only had one brush with an actual snake. First time I moved to Georgia, there was a garden snake, I guess, just crawling on a fence, on the top of the fence, and I was literally right in front of it. It was right behind me.
Well, I'm in Pennsylvania, just
Right.
only about a mile and a half outside Philadelphia. You wouldn't think it, but we have a lot of wildlife where I'm at, especially in my house. A lot of spiders and snakes and things. But as getting back to the verse, I'm not sure, what all the spiritual implications here are about the serpent going on its belly and eating dust all the days of its life, except man is likened to dust, and man comes under the power and authority of Satan since the fall. So the snake is low. The snake is very low on the ground, but there's something lower, and that's the dust beneath it. And that would point to mankind, who has tremendously fallen from that high, glorious original status at creation of being made in the image and likeness of God to something beneath this lowly serpent. And that's one thing I think we can see. But thank you.
All right, thank you
for calling, and or I don't know what you call this for. I guess it's still a phone call. Thank you for your question, and let's go to Oliver. Oliver will send you the invite, and then you can.
Can you hear me, Chris?
Yeah, we can hear you fine. Please go ahead, Oliver.
Yeah, I just had a comment on the first caller, John Marino, on this idea of the hosts of heaven being angels. I know in your Genesis study, I have a note where this word host is Strong's number 6635. You tied it into Exodus 7:4 and Exodus 12:17.
Well, let's take a look. Exodus 7:4. Does it have to do with armies?
Yes.
But Pharaoh shall not hearken unto you. We're getting a little feedback. I guess you're picking up my voice somehow. That's coming through. But Pharaoh shall not hearken unto you, that I may lay my hand upon Egypt and bring forth mine armies and my people, the children of Israel, out of the land of Egypt by great judgment. So here God is referring to his host that there are the children of Israel. And I think there's several references like that. And thus the heavens and the earth were finished and all the host of them. I have a terrible memory. And I try to compensate for that with notes. But the problem is I change Bibles every now and then, and I don't carry over all the notes. But from what I remember is the formation, the creation of the heavens and the earth is related to the Lord Jesus and his atoning work at the foundation of the world. And so not only does God create the heavens and the earth, but all the host of them, pointing to all the armies of the kingdom of heaven, all the elect that also are a finished work, because the works were finished from the foundation of the world through the Lord's sacrificial offering of himself as the Lamb of God. I think that was the general idea. Is that what you have in your notes? I think you're muted.
Yes, that's what I have in my notes. You also said that the host was a picture of God in Psalm 24:10.
Psalm 24:10.
Yes.
Who is this King of glory? Jehovah of hosts. He is the King of glory. Selah. Yeah. The host, the King of the army. God is King of saints. For example, in Revelation 19, when Christ comes, well, we know he comes with 10,000s of his saints, but here in Revelation 19, he's called the Word of God. And in verse 14, and the armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses, clothed in fine linen, white and clean. And the armies would identify with the host. I believe that word in the Old Testament is also translated as armies in some places. So it just sort of conveys that idea. And it's amazing what the Lord ties to Christ's death at the foundation of the world. There's just a tremendous emphasis on it, and everything really regarding this creation and the creation to come. It often leads back right to that point in eternity past. But thank you
Thank
for
you.
your question, and let's go to Tip. Tip will send you a link, and you can accept it and take the mic.
Chris, how are you? Can you hear me again?
Yeah, we can hear you fine. Please go ahead.
I have a wide margin Bible. I try to take notes in it, but I have problems trying to cram them in. So I'm thinking about getting one of those binders, those binders, loose page binders, and you get, they send you extra pages with it, and you can write notes. You can add pages. But trouble is, I can't read my own writing half the time, and I'm like a wild horse. When it comes to taking, I need to be reined in. So that's why I would like you to rein me in if you can. And this notes
I have to rein myself in before I can go to anybody else.
Yeah, well, maybe you can help. So it's regards to Genesis Hagar. If you could read Genesis 16 verses 13 to 14.
Genesis 16, verse 13. And she called the name of Jehovah that spake unto her, Thou God seest me. For she said, Have I also here looked after him that seeth me? Wherefore the well was called Bir Laharoi. Behold, it is between Kadesh and Bered.
So this is my mini Bible study, but I mean, I don't know if I'm on the right route. So I looked up some of these words, Kadesh, and then I tied that with striking the rock, right? Christ. Then I looked up Bered, and there is no other word called Bered except the son of Ephraim was in judgment. So I looked up another word, Bered, which is 1259 or 1260. It's very similar to Bered, and that ties to hailstone in the Old Testament. For instance, the hailstone in the during Pharaoh's time, and it also speaks about hailstone, treasures of hail in Job. So for the part one of my question, I won't take too long. Am I on the right? Is it permissible to use Bered and tie it to Bered, which have the same vowels? Is it permissible to go that route? I think it ties to judgment.
Does this word have the same consonants? Does it have the same consonants?
Yeah, it's Bered. This is Bered.
Right. Well, it would basically be the same word. It's just the vowels
Yeah.
that would make it sound different, the vowel points, and they
Okay.
were added later. Now, as far as Kadesh here, there's also a Kadesh with an E, Kedesh. Did you check that out? Is that the same word?
I was looking up this. It took me a while. There's a Kadesh Barnea, right, where the spies were sent out, and there's a Kadesh. But this is over in the land of Zen, which ties with where they struck the rock. So I'm not saying that 100% from my own meager studies. That's what I tied it to. There's two Kadeshes, the Kadesh Barnea and the Kadesh over in Zen. Barnea is over in another.
But the word Kadesh with the K-E-D, that comes from a word that means holy or purify. So is it the same word?
I think it is, but I'm not. I have so many notes here, wouldn't be able to find it, but I think it is. But on that note, okay, let's say I'm not sure about that, but regarding Bered. So then I said, okay, let's go to the New Testament and check out the word hailstone in the New Testament. And as you know, it's in Revelation. Like one place we could go is Revelation 8. Let's see, I had notes here. Sorry. Revelation 8. I'll go 11:19. Revelation 11:19.
Okay, Revelation 11, verse 19. And the temple of God was open in heaven, and there was seen in his temple the ark of his testament, and there were lightnings and voices and thunderings and an earthquake and great hail.
All right, so then I said, what's the root word of hail? So I found out that the root word of hail is, there's two root words. One is to lower, when you lower the net that broke, the net that broke, the fishing net, when they lowered that net. And also when Paul's shipwreck was lowered, the boat was lowered into the water. And I remember Mr. Campen teaching that was the end of the church age. Acts 27:28. So I thought maybe it might tie into Hagar. And there's another root word that's called where Abraham is, where Lazarus is sitting on Abraham's lap, and there's a chasm. That's another root word.
Why are you thinking this word hail ties into Hagar?
Because Hagar was brought in the latter rain, and the root word of hail in the New Testament ties to the end of the church age. So I thought there would be a connection there, But this is why, and all this is like, I'm just asking, would that be a right way to go about studying the Bible? That's basically what I'm asking.
Well, all I can say is how, I would personally approach it is I would look up the words and I try to I try to build on things that I know. You know what I mean? Like if I come to a verse and I find various you know, tie-ins to various words, root words, and all these kinds of things. Most of it I don't understand, but when I come to the verse, there's something I do understand, and or a word, and I follow that word, and so I try to just you know, grow in understanding before I get into all these other areas, and I would just kind of file them away. Well, if there's something interesting, maybe, you know, jot it down, and maybe something will come up in the future. But I think it's helpful to me to just go over what I know, and maybe, you know, one additional thing is added, or I learn one more thing, or another thing, and it kind of builds, rather than if I go off in many areas. Sometimes I do that. Occasionally I'll do that, but for the
But-
most part, I just try to stay in things that are proven. That's what I mean by know. You know, we can prove this from the Bible. We have correct understanding of this, and then I venture out from something that I know to another verse, and I try to come to understand that.
Yeah, well, okay, because you know there was a few other times like Abraham, the rich man. I think I heard you teach, or Gunter, that they were a picture of the church, maybe the rich man, and he was looking for water. But here you had Hagar; she was by rivers, a well of water. So I do kind of look.
No, I never taught. I don't
Oh,
think
you did
that the
not. Oh,
rich
maybe
man
I'm
was. You
mistaken.
mean in the parable of the rich man
Yeah,
and
he was
Lazarus?
in purple. He was in purple robe.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe Gunter didn't either. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting.
Well, I think there's you know, reference to riches, and remember, mankind was a king too. He was established as king of the earth, the first king, and like in Ezekiel, in references to Tyrus, where he's referred to as a king, and he was in the Garden of Eden. So just because Lazarus, you know, is clothed in purple and that kind of thing, I don't think that definitely proves that it's just the church person. But
Okay, thanks.
yeah, well, thank you for calling and sharing, and bringing up these verses. I think that's all the questions we have tonight. So we're going to stop here. I'd like to mention a couple of things before we close, and that is two men went to Ottawa, Canada over the weekend. They sent back a couple of videos. You can watch them on the website, ebiblefellowship.org, or on our YouTube page. They're pretty short, like 30 seconds each. But Tony also, who he's one of the men who went, said that the track was perfect for the situation, that it was an excellent situation for handing out tracts because there was no vehicle traffic. Everything's blocked off and everyone's walking around. And of course, you know, the demonstration, the protest that they're doing, it is sort of a vivid image of the world's division, and division as it's come to that country. And so the track, Tony thought was very, very appropriate, very fitting. And from what I could gather, they had 2,000, 2,500 tracks. I don't know how many they gave out, but it seems to have been very good reception. and Lord willing, there's another day of tracking coming up in Tampa, Florida on the 19th, just to remind everybody. And another announcement concerns Zoom. Next Sunday, we're going to have an EBF panel discussion starting at 7 p.m. Eastern time on Zoom. It's going to be a different format than this. Well, we still hope 9 o'clock Eastern to have the Q&A, but at 7, there's going to be 5 of us that will get together, and we're going to start off by talking about Mr. Camping's book, 1994. And we're going to try and go through the book, not all in one sitting, but in these programs, we'll go through all the chapters, discussing the various points, any kind of corrections, and so forth. And we're going to discuss it in relationship to the Bible. So we'll read something from maybe a sentence or two from the book. We're not going to read the book. It's copyright, so we can't. But we'll say, well, now this stood out in chapter 1, and maybe read a couple of sentences to a short paragraph, then discuss it, and it will prompt us to give supporting scripture, that kind of thing, with everyone who's on this panel. I think the way that we're going to have it designed is you'll just see the 5 individuals, and there'll be a discussion amongst those 5. But at the end, after the discussion is over, we'll open it up the last 10 minutes or so. Does anybody have a comment, something like that, or a question about what we were talking about, which would be chapter 1 of the book 1994? And or somebody could give a personal testimony of, yeah, that was the book that really hit me, or whatever you would like. But that we hope to start, Lord willing, next Sunday, and it'll be every Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern, except for the Day in the Word Sunday, just like we won't have Zoom Q&A on the Day in the Word Sunday. But beginning next Sunday at 7, and it'll go an hour and a half till 8:30, and then we'll get a little break before we come back for the 9 o'clock Q&A. That's the plan anyway. We'll see. It's always Lord willing how things actually work out. So hope you can join us then. But for now, may you have a good night, and may the Lord's perfect will be done.